Outliers. Welcome back to another mobility series. Today we're going to be focusing on snowboard athletes. So snowboarding, we're going to go up. Obviously it's always cold. It's pretty hard to get out of the vehicle and do a mobility drill before, heading out to, the slopes and everything. So this is totally going to be cool to do at home ahead of time. If you have space up on the mountain before going out, fantastic. Very simple. All you're gonna need is a floor. So if you have a space to do that when you're up at the mountain, fantastic. If you don't, do this at home before you head out, or at wherever you're staying before you head out to the mountain. At least get a little bit loosey-goosey prior to heading out there and having a blast of a day. So the first thing we're gonna start with is a 90-90 hip switch. This is honestly one of my favorites, and it's something that I utilize in my warm-ups, I utilize in mobility. So easiest way to get started in this position is we're gonna place the hands behind us, and then we're going to put our feet out wide, and we're just gonna fall to one side. Now the reason why this is called 90-90 is because we're creating 90-degree angles in all the joints, ankle, knee, hip, knee, ankle. But also this can be called a shin box because we're creating kind of a box. So let's pay attention to the box that we're creating right here, and that's the position we want to maintain throughout the duration of this movement. So we're gonna do the easiest version, and I'll also show you a little bit harder version that you can opt into as we get flowing here. So I'm gonna keep my hands placed back behind me, and we're just gonna swivel over to the other side while maintaining that shin box position. Now, as I said, this is a little bit of the easier version. If you want a little bit more toughness to it, or maybe a little bit more muscular activation, we're gonna remove the hands out and we're gonna rotate ourselves with our hips. So it's just going to facilitate a more muscular activation in the hips. You might also find that you kind of drift forward while you're doing this. That's totally normal. So I'm gonna keep my hands back, lets me just be a little bit more supportive in this. And I'm gonna focus on that knee coming down and in, getting a little stretch. I can even counter stretch a little bit with my torso. So I'm gonna lean to the opposite direction, get a little bit more of my internal rotation of that hip, because that's all we're really doing is doing rotation at the hip, internal, external, internal, external. I'm doing roughly 5 to 10 on each side. I say roughly, do as many as you need to feel good with the motion, of course. Now, some of you might be watching this and going, oh, I thought Outlier was just a motocross guy. I thought all he did was motocross. No, we're doing all action sports. We're gonna bring good strength and conditioning, mobility, warm-ups, muscular endurance, hypertrophy to all action sports here. So don't get too caught up in thinking I'm a one-trick wonder, because here we are. So after we've done those 90-90 hip switch, next we're going to move to a forward fold with a squat. So this might look a little bit different for everyone. Simply put, we're going to be in a standing position where we're going to hinge forward and touch our toes. That's our forward fold. And then we're gonna drop our butt down. Now, ignore my knees cracking. That just so happens to be how I am, but we're gonna try and maintain our torso in contact with our thighs as we're going through this position. That might mean that your butt only raises up to here rather than here, and that's totally fine. But we're working on that deep squat position, and then up and into that standing forward fold position. Really good stretch for the hamstring, and also really good activation for like our hip flexors and the muscles of our quads, because we're pushing back into that extension while maintaining contraction of the hip flexors to stay in contact with our thighs as we're going through. So this one actually has got a little bit of work to it, but it's nice because we're gonna use an agonist-antagonist muscular action, so an opposite muscle group to actually push the stretch, which our quads are pushing, which is helping our hamstrings stretch, which is actually one of the most beneficial ways to actually gain flexibility in tissue, is to work agonist-antagonist relationships. Now, after we've done roughly 5 to 10 of those, again, we're just gonna move on to the next one, which is a deep squat with a rotation. Now, this can look really different for a lot of people. So when we're doing a deep squat, as we just kind of were, it might be kind of hard to hold that position for you. So if you want to sit back on something, that is totally cool. However, for the sake of today, I am totally fine with sitting in a deep squat position. From here, we're going to take our opposite hand to the opposite ankle, which is gonna drop that shoulder in, and we're gonna rotate up to the ceiling, grab the apple, whatever you wanna grab. I'm a Northwest guy, so I'm gonna go with apples. I guess I could go with cherries, but I like apples more than cherries. I'll eat an apple a day, I won't eat a cherry a day. So you can see I'm dropping in on the shoulder and actually pushing that leg out while I'm kind of bound to that ankle, which doesn't let me twist. Like I said, you can be seated and doing this too. You don't need to be in the deep squat if you're not quite there yet. Grab that opposite ankle, drop it in, and then reach it to the ceiling. It's actually probably the most productive upper back stretch that there is. And the best part about it is we're getting really good mobility of our ankles, our knees, our hips, our back, our shoulders. This is really a full body thing. We're really just wringing it out. So I like this one. This one's great. And also, even though like if you're up on the slopes and you have boots on and everything, it can be kind of hard to maybe get into like a deep seated position, but you can still kind of hit some of this stuff when you're out there if you're feeling like a little bit tight in between runs and everything. Next thing is a quadruped thoracic rotation. Quadruped, hands and knees, 4 points of contact, pretty simple. So hands on the floor, knees on the floor, feet are resting back behind us, and we're in that tabletop position. We're going to take one hand and place it behind the ear. We're not going to place it behind the head because I don't want you pulling on your head down, but place it behind the ear. And then we're going to touch our opposite wrist and then rotate it to the ceiling. So a nice thoracic rotation as we just did, but now we're doing it from a different position. Just gonna allow us to push that floor away with the opposite arm, get up in there. And it's gonna help us rotate a little bit more into like the lower thoracic the lower thoracic, which our thoracic spine is 12 vertebrae, sits in the middle. So it runs from the bottom of the neck down to the L1 in the lower back. So it makes up a big portion of our spine, and there's 24 vertebrae, and that's 12 of them. So we're gonna tend to all of those different vertebrae through this rotation. And of course, take good breaths. I guess I didn't mention that in the beginning, I apologize. Breathe through your nose, out through your mouth, breathe through your nose, out through your nose. However, try not to suck in a bunch of air through your mouth. Anytime, honestly. But honestly, if we're doing stretching and stuff like that, or even warm-ups, we should be trying to utilize nasal breathing as much as possible. Next one, this one, if you have low profile shoes, we'll work with shoes on, but more high profile shoes, maybe stiffer shoes, probably not gonna be the best for this one. So you might wanna take those off. This is a foot stretch. I don't know how many times I've heard people talk about their feet cramping out when they're snowboarding or skiing, or, you know, because those boots are so confining, and anytime we put our feet in a small space, all of those joints and all those bones and muscles really get crammed together. So imagine saran wrapping your hand and then putting forces into it. You're gonna eventually get something that's not very happy. So we're gonna stretch out the plantar fascia of the foot to try and help facilitate a little bit looser feeling in the foot, and maybe prevent some of the cramping in the feet while we're out having a blast, okay? So this one's very easy to set up for. All we're gonna do is go to our knees, which is a kneeling position. We're gonna tuck our toes underneath, boom, boom, and then we're just gonna sit back onto them. Now, this is gonna feel very different for everyone. So if maybe sitting all the way back is a little bit uncomfortable, you can raise yourself up a little bit. but this is a huge stretch for the bottom of the feet, also the toes and everything like that. So take your time with it. Definitely embrace that like little bit of uncomfortableness that this has, because it really seems like it shouldn't be that uncomfortable, but it can be pretty uncomfortable, especially if your feet are tight and you're not really used to letting your toes open and splay and pull back and stuff like that. Great. Out of that, roughly 30 seconds, we're gonna stay in a kneeling position. I'm just gonna turn to the side a little bit. But in this kneeling position, we're gonna put our hands down for a quadruped, and we're gonna kick one leg out. And this is gonna get into our adductors. Our adductors play a really big part in stabilization of the hip and knee. So we gotta make sure that we get them warmed up nice and ready. And it's also a nice way to actually keep better control, whether you're skiing or snowboarding. Because snowboarding, if we actually squeeze in on the bindings, we can just gain a little bit more control through our pelvic floor into our legs, knees, ankles, and make that contact with the board a little bit better. So leg goes out, and we're just gonna rock it back. Now, in this position, it could look a lot different for everyone. So if you're a little bit more flexible, that leg's gonna kick out a little bit further. But maybe you're not that flexible, so maybe that leg's gonna sit up a little bit higher. But the goal is to keep a line from the knee, the hip, and the ankle on the opposite leg as we kick back for about 5 to 10 reps. You can untuck the foot if you'd like. Kind of depends on the feeling. I think more flexible people probably untuck it so that they could sit back further, get into there. Now, our adductor muscles, there's 3 of them on the inside of our leg. They run out of our groin into the femur, boom, boom, boom. And those 3 muscles play a big part in squeezing, but there's still one more muscle, because if we're talking about those 3 muscles running into the femur, why do we feel it all the way down here? Well, that's a good question, and that's gonna be because our gracilis muscle runs all the way down past the knee joint. So that gracilis muscle is actually the muscle a lot of people feel when like their inside their legs are really, really tight. So this is a really good stretch for the gracilis and helping out that muscle, which plays in adduction of the leg, but also a little bit of knee flexion with the hamstrings. So pretty cool muscle playing 2 roles there. 5 to 10 on this side as well. Feel it out a little bit. Now lastly, we're just gonna stretch out the quads, because obviously the quads get a lot of work when we're out there. So when doing this, remember that stretching is a great precursor to a good warm-up, but it in itself isn't gonna be everything we need for a complete warm-up. So make sure we do some dynamic stuff, which we'll have another video to follow this one up with some dynamic movements to get you ready to go. Last thing is a simple anterior chain stretch. You can do this with or without a prop in the back. I'm gonna utilize a prop, but you're more than welcome to actually just sit back in this kneeling position and push the hip forward, and or grab, if you have the ability to grab backwards like such, creating that nice stretch in the quad in this position. But like I said, you can also back it up to something, prop that foot up, and sit. So this is a nice position to do on a couch or a chair, if you're comfortable, of course. And then that helps us stretch that. Want a little bit more of a stretch, we can always put a hand up, just elongates that system on that side a little bit more, but depends on the person and what you're feeling. But we're gonna roughly hold this for 30, 40 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and switch it. Stretching is such an interesting thing, because we all know we should do it, and we all feel better when we do it, but we don't like taking the time to do it. So hopefully these videos are helping. You know, you take the time to tend to your body a little bit more, get some stretching in, and feel better. Stretching can be done at any time, morning, afternoon, evening, pre or post workout. There are some stuff about like ultimate like performance and like static stretching where maybe we don't want to do a ton of static stretching before we do like some explosive high performance activity. That's a whole different can of worms, but you know, there is some evidence in there. But for the most part, stretching is going to be good at any point of the day. So we're all finished up. Now, as I said, this is a great warm-up, or excuse me, this is a great precursor to a warm-up with this stretching. So make sure that you check out the next video, which is going to be a full-blown warm-up for snowboarders heading out to the slopes. And remember, please like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.